It feels like all the headlines are just focused on the next flashy AI model, right? But there's a much bigger, much quieter story unfolding right under our noses. And it's a trillion-dollar story, folks. We're talking about a massive shift in global capital, a pivot away from just abstract code and towards the very real, very concrete foundations of our AI future.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Software captures headlines, infrastructure captures balance sheets. I mean, think about it. The latest AI app gets all the media buzz, but the real long-term value, that's being built into the physical stuff, the hard infrastructure that makes it all possible. And that is where the really serious money is flowing.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the sheer scale of this pivot. Then we'll dig into why infrastructure is suddenly king over software. We'll name the key players in this new global race, find some of the surprising winners, and finally, get to the bottom of why this whole investment cycle is just different. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the trillion-dollar pivot. So what's really crucial to get here is that underneath all the noise of the daily market, something huge is going on. A massive reallocation of capital is happening, and it's happening at a speed that we have just rarely, if ever, seen before. Yeah, so you really have to get out of the mindset that tech is just code floating around in the cloud. This is not a software story. This is an industrial story. We're talking about a very real, very heavy build-out of assets. Think massive data centers, powerful grids, and state-of-the-art semiconductor factories. This is about steel, concrete, and silicon on a global scale. And that brings us right to our next big point: infrastructure over software. We've moved beyond just talking about AI as a productivity narrative. Now, it's a hard capital mandate. The whole conversation among investors, among governments, it's completely changed. It's not a question of if AI is going to reshape our economies anymore. The question now is a race to decide who will own the very foundation of it all.
And this slide really highlights the core difference, right, between the old tech cycles and what's happening today. On one side, you had these speculative tech narratives, all about software and apps, kind of discretionary spending, chasing the latest trend. But on the other side, now you've got these hard capital mandates. The focus is on physical assets. This is non-discretionary, it's essential. We're not just chasing a trend here. We are building the foundation for the entire future economy.
So when the goal is to literally own the foundation of the future, well, that naturally leads to some pretty intense competition. And that's our next section, the new global race. So who are the big players in this fight to control the world's AI infrastructure? Because let me tell you, this is a battle playing out between giant corporations and even entire countries.
First up, you've got the giants you'd expect, right? The hyperscalers. We're talking Microsoft, Google, Amazon. And they are pushing their investment plans into total overdrive. But this is not short-term thinking at all. They are locking in commitments for decades to come, securing everything from power agreements and land rights to the essential supply chains for their chips.
Then, of course, you have the chip leaders. Companies like NVIDIA and TSMC are expanding their manufacturing capacity at a staggering rate. The scale of what they're doing is so big, it feels less like a corporate project and more like a national industrial policy. I mean, they're literally building the brains for this entire operation. And all of this build-out creates this really interesting new dynamic, the rise of what you could call emerging powerhouses. All of a sudden, any region that can offer stable power, clear, predictable regulations, and just pure speed of execution, they now have incredible leverage. They're not begging for speculative capital anymore. Now they are competing to land these huge, strategic, long-term infrastructure mandates.
Okay, so with all this money pouring into infrastructure, who really benefits? This is where it gets interesting. Let's talk about the downstream winners, because the impact here goes way beyond just the big tech companies. It's pulling capital all the way down the value chain to some players you might not expect, but who are absolutely critical. I mean, just think about it for a second. The real winners here might not be who you think. It's the companies doing the gritty foundational work. We're talking about the utilities that have to provide constant power, the construction firms actually building these data centers, the industrial landowners with the right plots of land, the energy developers shoring up the grid, and the logistics operators managing these insane supply chains. All of a sudden, these guys become absolutely essential. And the fact that all those downstream players are so essential, well, that leads us to our final and maybe most important point, capital's new conviction. This is really where we get into the permanence of these investments and what makes this entire tech cycle so fundamentally different from anything we've ever seen before.
So it really all boils down to this idea called locked-in capital. Think about it. AI needs nonstop power and unbelievable security. Once you build a massive data center and you secure its energy source, you can't just undo that investment. It's stuck there. This is capital that is committed for decades. And that level of permanence completely changes the game for how major institutions think about their long-term strategy.
And maybe the most telling signal of all isn't a stock price or some market trend. It's the speed at which decisions are being made. You've got capital committees greenlighting these gigantic, multi-decade projects with almost no hesitation. That's not speculation, folks. That is pure, deep-seated conviction.
Years from now, when we look back at this time, this might be how we remember it. Not just as the AI boom, but as the exact moment that global capital pivoted away from clever financial games and back to the hard, tangible, world-changing work of industrial execution.
So let's end with this thought. The rails for the entire next economy, they're being built as we speak, right now, in concrete and silicon. And the biggest question isn't what kind of cool stuff is going to run on those rails. The real question is, who's going to own them?